this was my choice and this was my responsibility, and this is what I chose to do at that point in time. In the future, so how do we go through this? Like you're asking, how do we change? What do we learn from this? We can choose to learn and stay in the victim mindset and be like, well, all this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me. True, it did happen to you, absolutely. But what can I learn?
Hello, Thrivers. Welcome back to season 3 of Thrive with Sharon podcast. And I am really finally feeling like we're hitting our stride with all of this. This has really just been over a year that we've had this podcast going. And it's been such an incredible journey for me personally, as well as for all of our community. It just continues to grow. And I'm so excited that you're here. I just want to remind you, if you don't mind, if you're listening to this, wherever you are, to make sure that you like and subscribe. And especially today, you might want to download this episode because I have Alexandra Harbushka today. And she is I can't wait to dig into the conversation, but her story and her journey is absolutely incredible. So Alexandra, her life was completely sent into an upheaval when she received a call from her doctor with a diagnosis saying that she had herpes. And it literally shook her entire life. Her goals, her happiness, her desires, they all just went up in smoke. And she is here to share more about how she has worked within that health diagnosis and how she's actually alchemized this into going out publicly and sharing more important information, destigmatizing the actual diagnosis of something like herpes. But also, she's created a podcast and she's created a business where she is able to use that as a launching pad to reach out to more people. So Alexandra, I am so excited to have you here. Welcome. I can't wait to get started in the conversation. Welcome.
I know, me too. I'm so excited, Sharon. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for the introduction. This is going to be such a fun podcast, and yeah, herpes.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
let's just dig in, right?
Okay.
We're known for like not staying on the surface for too long. So
Yeah, let's get into it.
welcome. And let's just like dig into this conversation because, um, first, I'm just curious. I'm just sitting back wondering about, wow, okay. So this is something that is a very personal thing,
Mhm.
right? And why did you find it important to share with the world
Right.
that you have this?
Right. It was very terrifying. Let me think back. So just to give everyone just a brief history of kind of what happened and the dates and kind of actually
Yeah.
what herpes is, because there are a lot of times we misunderstand what herpes is. So in 2003, I was diagnosed with HSV1, which is commonly known as cold sores or oral herpes.
Mm,
And then in 2011, I was diagnosed with genital herpes, HSV2. And they were both completely different types of situations or emotions being diagnosed. With oral herpes, which we say, oh, you have a cold sore. Okay, yeah, everyone has that. Or, oh, I have fever blisters or whatever.
mm,
Um, I was in pain, like physically with the blisters, but no big deal. Oh, okay, yeah, everybody has that. Okay, cool. It wasn't traumatizing. It wasn't catastrophic. It was, oh, okay, everybody has that.
yeah.
Um, and when I got genital herpes in 2011, it was, oh my gosh, I have an STD. How did this happen? How did I get this? That wasn't in my plan.
Right.
And we all have these preconceived notions of what somebody looks like with an STD, how they got it, their lifestyle, or who they're dating. May not necessarily be that person, but oh well, we know why they have it because of that person they dated. Clearly,
Mhm,
is the thought we have. So
yeah.
back to your initial thought, why was it so important for me to tell the world? And I was asked to speak at a podcast conference in 2017,
Mm,
in January, February 17. And the topic was something vulnerable and something about self-worth and self-love. And so I was going to talk about, I got into debt when I was like 25 years old. And I lived in New York City and got into some debt. And my now husband, then boyfriend, was like, Alexandra, everyone gets into debt at 25. Like it's not that big of a deal. Like unless it
I
was
know it's a big
millions,
deal, but not that big of a deal.
right?
Yeah.
Unless it was like millions or like
Right.
billions or, something. But he's
Right.
like, a couple $1,000s is not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
I was like, well, it was. He goes, why don't you talk about your herpes diagnosis? And I was like, absolutely not. There's no way. I'm not, ex-boyfriends know, my best friends know. That's it. Like we don't talk about this. Of
That's as
course
far
not.
as it's going. Right.
Yeah,
Right.
obviously. It's very taboo. It's very shameful.
Yes.
It's scary. And he just said, well, do you feel that by sharing your story, you can help people? And I said,
Mm.
I do. So that was terrifying. Um,
Uh, that's an understatement. I can't even imagine. I
yeah,
cannot even like, even just to make the decision to open the circle of people
right,
who you shared with is
right.
scary, because there's that, I can only imagine there's this feeling of like, what are they going to think? How are they going to look
Yeah.
at me? How are they going to treat me? Am I going to, whatever. But to share it in that kind of forum, I mean, you went big.
On stage.
You
On
went big.
stage. I had a great dress though. It was like, I felt like Scarlett O'Hara. I had like a moment. I was
Yay.
like, I have like the dress that says like, yes, this is okay. I'm doing it. Um, but, and so I had that, not thinking I would go anywhere with it. I just thought I would say this and continue on with my other podcasts and life. And all of a sudden when I made that announcement and I gave this speech and I talked about it, and a couple of things happened in the room. So number one, the room went silent. Everyone stopped texting or whatever, that was number one, obviously. Number two, and we have to remember, this is 2017. We're now in 2022. A lot's changed about opening up about taboo topics. That was still
Yeah. It's so
really
true.
like even
Yeah.
now that would still be a shocker to go to be at like a podcast conference and someone talking about a herpes
Jealous.
diagnosis,
Yeah.
but that was still really taboo. So people came up to me and either said I have it too, or
Mm.
they came up to me and said I don't have herpes but I have my story. And that's really what's important, is everybody has their story. Mine just happened to be a herpes diagnosis that completely transformed my life for the better. And I wouldn't change it for the world. But everybody has their story that they are embarrassed about, or that they put their own glass ceiling on. Like I
Yeah.
can't, whatever it is, I can't get a job because I never had the opportunity to go to college. And so therefore I don't have a bachelor's degree. I'm never going to be able to be successful. Or I can't do this because I never had braces as a kid and now it's too late and I can't get braces and I have awful teeth and so therefore I never smile, or what I'm making things up. But
Right.
we all have and it could be something as we might giggle and be like, braces, what's the big deal? But to that person it might be a herpes diagnosis.
Mm-hmm.
Um and it could be a domestic abuse situation. It could be a drug abuse situation. It could be all sorts of things that were like, if the world found out, I would die, literally die. But
You think
everybody has that
you
story.
literally think that you would die, but really it's the thing that connects you with the world and with your
Exactly.
people.
Exactly. Exactly. And
Yeah.
and with that being said, I went public about it. That doesn't mean for people listening, you need to like spread the world. You don't need to be like, I was thinking, what's the movie I'm thinking of? The Hills Are Alive. Um,
Oh. Right.
Julie
Like
Andrews.
Julie
Yeah,
Andrews,
like,
like standing on top of the mountain, just like, hello, let me
right.
tell you
No,
all of the things. And I stubbed my toe this morning. And
right,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
But it's remembering that we are human. We do have humbling experiences, and rather than shying away from that, it's leaning into it and saying, okay, what do I need to, how am I going to use this experience?
yeah. I always reflect back to, the work that we do, right? And we're here to help people to become
Mhm.
more of who they are. right? You're doing it,
Right.
I'm doing it, right?
What we're doing.
And the thing that I always think about is how humility
Right.
helps to create that. And I don't know if you have children. I have two children.
I
They're
do.
actually adults now, but I'm still a
Right.
child in my parents' eyes.
Right.
So, but I used to always think that I was this great person, right? And I really very carefully curated this image of myself, way back
Of
when,
course.
until I had children. And then they created such a level of humility and humble pie that I had to eat every single day because
Yep.
whether it was, like one of them like throwing a fit in the middle of the grocery store and knocking all of the cereal boxes down,
And people
or
staring at you
and
that are
people
not
staring at
parents and
you.
like, why can't you check your kid? And you're like,
Right.
you understand, like, this is the 12th time today.
Yeah.
Like, done. Yeah.
Like, or how could
Right.
you stand there just letting your child do that? And it's just like,
Right.
all right, you want to take over, take the wheel, right?
Right.
And I'll give you the band-aids when you're done. Like I'll be at the first aid station. But yeah, so we all have these moments in our lives where we do find ourselves having to just stand just in our own nakedness,
Mhm.
right? On some level. And even if we don't choose it, and I'm not saying that we need to go out, like you had mentioned, we don't need to go out and, bear all to all, because I do believe that there are the right containers for the right conversations, right?
Mhm.
But if we don't, on some level, usually the universe brings us the opportunity to feel very humble or
Right.
have that experience of humility. I love that and I love your husband because he
Mhm.
prompted you to do it, right? So like that's
Right.
what
Right.
a great person he is. But I love that you said, yeah. You said yes
Right.
and you said yes to you.
Exactly. And when I was first diagnosed, I obviously talked to my best friend and she goes, Alexandra, you can choose to sit here and do nothing about it, or at some point in some day you can change it. And I was like, okay, that's weird. Like, so you want me to go like how would I, and this was in
Yeah.
11. So remember, like you're hearing this on the phone in 2011 with my BlackBerry, not iPhone. I didn't have an iPhone yet.
Yeah. Yep. Yep.
Um, I still had a BlackBerry. And anyways, like how would you go public? Because Zoom didn't exist. Facebook groups didn't exist. Instagram was randomly posting cute pictures. Like the platforms that we have today in order to support masses is huge.
Yeah.
And so that didn't exist. And that always like kind of sat with me. I'm like, "Ugh, what do you mean I have to do something about it? I don't want to do anything. I don't want to just want to pretend it didn't happen." And that wasn't the case. So
Yeah, I mean, a lot of times when we have some sort of traumatic experience, it kind of stays on a timeline, right? But for you, like it wasn't one of those things. And many of us have um like you said, maybe they didn't have the same diagnosis as you, but they have something similar, or they have a similar experience. And um but I do think we've come so far when it comes to understanding like health, our own health,
Mhm.
and how naturally things um come and course themselves through our body. And we're able to figure out how to peacefully coexist instead of fight.
Right.
Um, I'm curious what that journey was for you.
Um, yeah. So what's interesting, I'm like thinking r- relatively, I've had a few videos go very viral on TikTok. And when I say very viral, I mean multiple millions.
Wow.
And when I get to that level on TikTok, I have people that are not very nice. Um,
Mm,
however, when I'm just speaking to my community or just in general, the content that goes out, is very welcomed. I really, I've never had anybody really attack me personally. Except when I have those multiple million viral videos, because at that point you're not a human anymore. It's like, it's so easy to, like, when you see those videos that have like, 4 million views, you think that person is no longer human, but
Right.
we forget, like, no, they go home, they have a dog or a cat, or like
Yeah.
they have, like, they're normal. Um, we no longer view them as normal because we see millions of views. It's easy to critique that person.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but honestly, the journey has not been, it's not been, the stigma. So the stigma is anyone that has herpes is promiscuous. They're not responsible. They are living a deviant lifestyle, so they must participate in other deviant things.
Mm-hmm.
And they don't have maybe a work, like they don't maybe care about their self-worth, or they don't they're just out there spreading it, or
Right. Right.
not being respectful to others.
Mm-hmm.
And of course you would never want to associate with somebody like that, because it's wrong
Mm-hmm.
and shameful and all those things. And what we don't realize is herpes is so common. 80% of the population actually has herpes.
Yeah.
um
That number is
yeah,
staggering.
astounding that that many
Yep.
people have it, yet
Mhm.
you are absolutely ostracized, um, as this awful person, um,
But I
it
want to interrupt you for a second.
yeah,
It's interesting. So 80% of our population, and that's the United States population, right?
yeah,
We're talking United States statistics. So 80% of the population is diagnosed with herpes. That's a diagnosis. That's not those who aren't diagnosed, right? And I'm sure that there are those that aren't diagnosed. However, isn't it interesting to know that there is still such a stigma being perpetuated? And part of the reason why is don't you think the lack of acceptance of each person's individual diagnosis?
absolutely. Absolutely. And I also think, so for example,
Mhm.
since we're speaking about STDs, we could go into other things like cancer or heart disease, but if we're speaking about STDs, HIV, the epidemic was, late
Yeah.
80s, early 90s.
Mhm.
And we
Mhm.
came together globally to find, we had walks, we had, it
Yeah.
global awareness of like, we need to find something. We had Princess Diana going and visiting AIDS patients. Like, so,
Mm.
and that was like, I remember seeing that in like People magazine, like, what? Like
Yeah.
she's not gonna catch it? I mean, it was that terrifying. Um, so it was awareness of like, wow, we need to fix this. We need to solve this. This is a problem. How do we solve this? Then we
Mhm.
had the HPV vaccine that came out roughly 2000, 2001-ish. I don't recall exactly. And the marketing and the awareness around that. HPV has existed for ever. And it was bringing awareness. It was never discussed. It was never anything that's ever discussed until roughly 2000. And it was brought of the awareness of like, we have a vaccine. This could potentially cause cancer. We have a vaccine to prevent this and protect our young children or adolescents going into adulthood. And
Mhm.
we need to help this. Herpes was like, this scum of, it was like, it was brought, the pharmaceutical companies brought awareness to it as like, you are a bad person, but I will save you by giving you this prescription, and now you can live a normal life but don't tell anybody, and we can just forget about it. So it's all the marketing and awareness around it.
Yeah, I don't even know if you want to go there or not, but even what yes, but I'll just toss it out. We can let it fade to black or not. But I going back to your example of HIV, I think that HIV was the dirty little secret, and we
Totally.
we totally it was those people, right? Or
Right.
gay men or
Right.
whatever that, but it wasn't until white housewives, right, of
Right.
the United States started to contract HIV. And then all of a sudden, then it became something that people
Right.
were taking on, right?
Right.
So, um, I just wonder now, though, knowing that this is kind of the way that herpes is being treated. It's like always that, like you said, it's like the dregs of the bottom, right? For
Mhm.
whatever reason, how can then someone who is diagnosed find their community? I think that the antidote to disease is community
Absolutely.
and connection.
And that's something really new. I would say relatively new. There's always connection and community has always been there. We've always needed that, but there
Mhm.
was so many decades that we didn't discuss our needs, so we didn't have
Right.
communities. There
Yes.
was no outreach.
Right. Right.
Um, you would never discuss a herpes diagnosis with your neighbor, but you would discuss a breast cancer diagnosis,
Right.
right? And everyone would
Socially
show up with the
acceptable.
casseroles that you don't want. They'd show up
Mhm.
with the casseroles. How can we help you? Can I watch your children while you go to chemo, whatever? A
Mm,
herpes diagnosis is like, well, you know why she got it.
right. And let's just let her suffer silently and not talk
Yeah,
about it.
because it's not really appropriate. We know what she was up to. It's not, and that's not the case. And just to defunk that or destigmatize herpes, 2 out of 3 people have HSV1, which is commonly associated with oral herpes, and 1 out of 6 commonly have HSV2, which is genital herpes. And what's so shocking is 90% of the people with genital herpes will never know they have it. They're not diagnosed. Not wild.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about to my question before. Just I was thinking that, gosh, if there's
Right.
80% are diagnosed with herpes, like that's who's diagnosed statistically. So, but 90%,
Will
90.
never be diagnosed. And there's a few reasons, whether we're talking oral or genital, and there's a couple of reasons. Is the majority of the population that has herpes are asymptomatic. So the only reason why they would know they had herpes is if they had, blisters or lesions and they're like, I'm in so much pain, something's not right, I need to go to the doctor.
Right.
And that's why. Otherwise, you would never, they can look like paper cuts. And as females, we could say, oh, you could either say, oh, it was my lip liner that I was putting on, and it was a wooden lip liner and I didn't sharpen it and it cut my lip. Or
Right.
I could, or, oh, I was nicked myself shaving, or it was my thong was too tight, or I wore really tight jeans, whatever. And
Right.
so we can easily say, oh, that's all it was. It wasn't anything. It was just an annoying little nick.
Right. Right.
Mhm.
Wow. Okay. So since we're kind of talking about symptoms and how, how it could potentially show up, my understanding is that like, and so you're helping me understand this more.
Yes.
So my understanding was that like your first episode, like
That
you,
was my thought
know.
as well. How could you not know?
Yeah,
How could you not know? But that's not the case. Yeah.
ah,
So in my situation, when I got genital herpes, my ex did not know that he had it. Like he just didn't know. He
mhm,
didn't get
mhm.
outbreaks. He didn't know. And the other thing that's unfortunate is people will think, well, why don't you just go get tested? It's not included in the STI tests. Herpes is not included. So you get tested for chlamydia or gonorrhea or whatever the list includes.
Mhm.
Herpes is not on there.
Why? I know I'm asking you, but
I I,
I'm
I
asking
know,
it to the
yeah,
world. Like, why? Why?
because the aftermath of if you don't have symptoms, the aftermath of finding out, it can be far heavier and far more tragic than someone
Mm,
that's like, I've never had a blister. Why do I need to know?
right. Right. Right.
Um, and that's a lot of times the mindset of the medical community. It's also not life threatening. We're not talking about something that has lifelong repercussions. This is, you get annoying blisters when you're stressed out or your immune system's low, and that's it.
Mm,
Like, it's embarrassing when you have them, um, but that's it.
interesting. Really
Yeah.
interesting. So really, this is not to create fear, right? To talk
No.
about this is not to create fear. And I'm sure that everybody's going to hear it through their own filter.
Lens. Yeah.
And they're going to see it through their own lens. But I really do think that I love the fact that we're having this discussion. I just think this is so healthy. And I love the fact that you have these discussions every single day. Like it just makes
Mhm.
my heart sing. Um, So really just to recap that part, the symptoms are, you could feel a little punky, you could feel a little, painful area, maybe not. You might have a little nick, you may not. And so it's okay if you do.
Exactly. I mean, everybody's going to come across it. It's impossible to go through life unless you literally are one person living on an island. Like you're dropped off at day one as an infant and never
Yeah.
touched humans. Like it's impossible to not come across it.
Yeah.
And it's just a matter of, does your immune system pick it up or not? So there's this whole thought of like, well, I'm just never going to be around it. I'm never going to associate with anybody that has this. And that always hurts me when I hear that, because I always say there's somebody that you love unconditionally. It could be a parent, could be a sibling, it could be a future spouse, could be your future child or your children that you love unconditionally. Multiple people that have this. And so whether it's oral or genital, it doesn't matter. It does the same thing. They oral herpes can easily become genital herpes.
Yeah.
Do things we do with our mouth. And
Right.
yeah, it's unfortunate when there is so much shame or rejection around dating that they're like, ew, that's gross. I don't want to be around it. Well, you've already kissed somebody or had sex with someone that has it too. So it's just a
Right.
matter of, did you get it or not?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. So then once you go from the diagnosis,
Uh-huh.
then what would that look like for someone?
So you mentioned community earlier, and I digressed. Finding a community so when you're diagnosed with whatever it is, it's going to be new in your life. You're not familiar with it. You're like, okay, I don't know what this now means. So number one, it would be educating yourself. What is this? What is it not? Like we just said, I had no idea that it was this common, or I had no idea that herpes doesn't have symptoms for majority of the population. How did I get this? All these things that are really important for us to be able to digest the information and then know how we want to proceed going forward with
Right.
our lives and future partners or a current partner or past partner. And then the next would be find a community. Like we said, it didn't exist for decades. Communities like this sort of support didn't exist, and now it's there. So we're specifically talking about herpes, but this could be also a community like yourself, your community. It could be communities for alcoholism if that's something you're dealing with. Like you need to find a community that you feel like you resonate with those people and those people get you and they are you.
Period. They
Yeah.
are you.
Mm-hmm.
We're all reflections of one another. And so, yeah, it doesn't matter. It crosses all lines. It's a socioeconomic, cultural, it crosses all lines, right? I don't know
Yeah.
one line that it doesn't cross.
When I was in 2011, when I was diagnosed, when I went on, and I don't know if it was the CDC, if it was Planned Parenthood, I don't know where I went at this point online. And it said, and I wish I had a screenshot or a printout of it, but it said people that are diagnosed with herpes have a high school education or less, are of lower socioeconomic status, have other STIs, and are of I forgot the races, but not non-Caucasian, not white. And I was like, I have a bachelor's degree. I was, raised in a wealthy family. Like it didn't, I was like, oh, okay. Like, awesome.
Yeah,
And that's what you're saying. That's not accurate. This is not accurate.
it's not.
It doesn't pick.
Shocker.
Yeah.
It's shock. So part of all of this too is I always like to zoom out, not just from this particular topic, but just in general, how we can more successfully move through the world is that we actually can use some of our own critical thinking and really take a look at it and say, like, how does this apply to me? How does this really apply to my needs? How is this serving me, or who is this serving by me receiving this information? Right.
And that's the key. And that's what I said earlier is I wouldn't change the fact that I have herpes. Like, is it annoying from time to time for me to get outbreaks? Absolutely. There's no doubt that is annoying, but so is getting a cold, and so is sitting in traffic, and so is all these other things.
Mhm.
some of the things that I really talk about in my community, and I'm personally faith-based. My community is not faith-based, but I am personally faith-based. And I like to look at two things. Number one is practice forgiveness. So
Ooh.
forgiving your partner, in this case, forgiving your partner, either your partner knew or did not know, and you may never know the truth to that. But forgive your partner. If your partner didn't know, he or she didn't know. They just didn't know. If they did know, that person wasn't they weren't in a emotionally stable place to begin to deal with it themselves. So you have to forgive them for that.
Yeah.
People just aren't assholes to be assholes.
No.
There's something deep down that they're just not ready for to
Right.
reach. And
Yeah.
then three, I mean, there might be a few assholes, but I mean,
Well,
like the mosquitoes out there are
yeah.
not, might be a
There's
few,
always a
but
couple sprinkled in here and there, but
right.
but
But usually,
yeah.
yeah. And then third, take responsibility for your actions. Otherwise, we continue to be in a victimized mindset,
Mm.
and we have to take responsibility. And I use myself as an example. I chose to date this person, and I chose to have sex with somebody. I chose to have sex with him. Those were my choices. And
Mhm.
those are pretty normal things. It's not unnormal to date somebody and then have sex with them. That's a normal thing.
Right.
Um, and so
It's actually healthy.
it's healthy.
Hello.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
healthy.
I was a 28-year-old single woman, and I dated someone, and we decided to be intimate. That's normal.
Consensually.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Um, and so I have to take I could easily point the blame at him and been like, da, 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 all these things, but it was my choice to do
Mhm.
that. So, um, those are some really key things that I think are important for whatever we're dealing with. Is this was my choice, and this was my responsibility, and this is what I chose to do at that point in time. In the future, so how do we go through this? Like you're asking, how do we change? What do we learn from this? We can choose to learn and stay in the victim mindset and be like, well, all this happened to me, this happened to me, this happened to me. True, it did happen to you, absolutely. But what can I learn? So me personally, I was 28. Remember I said I had debt. So I was still living at home, moved back from New York to San Diego, was still living at home. It's not super sexy after living in the Manhattan lifestyle. Um, you know, um, not at all.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, I was
Yeah.
binge eating. I was not,
Mm.
that was the way I thought I could stay thin. And I was drinking too much. I wasn't an alcoholic, but I was drinking too much.
Mhm.
I can look at that now and say I was definitely drinking too much. And little by little, I started making changes. I paid off my debt. I I eventually moved out of my parents' house, and I eventually broke up with that guy. Um, I figured out how to eat healthy and make that a priority. All these little shifts that I'm like, wow, had I not had that happen to me, I would have been still on this track of wake up, Alexandra. So that's me personally. And I think that in everybody listening, whatever your trauma or personal 9/11 event is,
Mm.
what can we learn? How do we move through it, and what do we learn, and accept it and just keep going?
Yes. So by taking a situation and asking, what can I learn and how can I grow from this?
Mhm.
Transmutes something that potentially can be catastrophic
Mhm.
and have a domino effect in so many different areas. And you can actually change it into something that is your launch pad for your health. And that's kind of what you did, right?
Right.
So the so for me, I like to break it down into awareness, right?
Mhm.
Acceptance, the healing part, and then the embodiment, right? And you appear to have very successfully been able to move through those stages. I want to just say, because everyone who's listening, they're all going to have their own personal experience with this conversation, right?
Totally. Mhm.
And so if this is not a diagnosis that you've received, right? This does not mean that you need to fearfully scurry and have night sleep and, whatever, right? Or no sleep for nights and nights. Like, it's just when you're ready. First of all, if you're not ready, if you just are so afraid to know, then find some wise counsel, seek some support. And I'm sure you have some support. I'm sure that you
Absolutely.
have some support, right? Um, Good friends, like you said, one of your best friends knew, your current partner knew, like, you take those people who are good and love you and support you, and you hold them close, right?
Mhm.
And you share with them, like, okay, I'm going through this experience right now. I have all these crazy thoughts. I'm actually like, I haven't slept since Thursday. Like, okay, can
Right.
you help me take the next step, right? To that clarity that you really are seeking.
Absolutely. And I want to build on that because I've found, and I'm sure you've found, there's three stages or three areas of emotions that people go through when there is something like this, a diagnosis or a change in life, right? A
Mhm,
shock in
mhm,
life is the
mhm.
fight, flight, or freeze.
Yep.
The fight, fight, or freeze. So the fight type of person, and I'm going to speak for herpes specifically, but the fight type of person that finds out they have a herpes diagnosis, they either want to go find a cure, they're like gonna scour Google and they're gonna find they think they're gonna find a cure. And they're just gonna like, I'm gonna find the one thing that's gonna cure it, or they want to fight the person that they got it from. Like they literally want to fight the person. Um, the the flight person is the type of person that doesn't associate with their diagnosis. I got this. I don't even know. I'm not gonna disclose to potential partners. I'm not gonna associate with it. I just, it doesn't exist in my life. Or the freeze person is the type of person that gets up, goes to work, comes home, and that's it. Like they don't go out, they don't go out with friends, they don't date. They can't they can't do anything for themselves
They
because
make their world really small.
exactly. And that's the
Mhm,
freeze.
mhm.
And there's not one right or wrong emotion. We all have one that's dominant. And then we go through all of them. So what you were saying is if there is someone that's going through something, maybe you are in the freeze zone and you think, okay, what can I do? Maybe I can go for a walk today and not just come home. Maybe I
Mhm,
can,
mhm.
okay, if I'm in the fight, okay, great. I'm in the fight, but maybe I can stop researching cures and
Mhm.
remedies and maybe I can just sit home like the freeze person's doing, but
Yeah,
to change it. Or if I
right.
literally want to fight that person, okay, what is something I can do nice for somebody else?
Mm.
And then the flight is like, okay, what do I need to bring myself back down and how do I face it? How do I look at the person in the mirror here and go, okay, this is what you
Right.
have.
How can I create safe presence in my body?
Right.
Yeah. Mhm. Yeah, that's a really great way to break it down. I think that, yeah, well, that's a survival mechanism, right?
Right.
So we think our brains and our bodies sometimes can be so rudimentary that they take any kind of major pivot as I'm gonna die. And so those activations are things that are built into us that help to keep us safe, that help to keep us alive, but they're not necessarily like well applied, right?
Right.
In this kind of
Right.
situation. So that's where we get to find out where our true healthy normal is, right? Where our true center
Right.
is, wherever it is. So if you're in the like high mobilization fight flight, stage, or if you're in the freeze stage or whatever it is, like, know yourself enough to know, like, oh gosh, oh, so what I'm doing right now and how I'm allowing my state of being to be right now isn't really healthy for me or people around me. So finding a way to be able to just get that
Yeah. Just be
well,
aware.
it's called ventral vagal regulation, basically, which is
Okay.
that it's that the way that our nervous systems are designed, which are the things that kick in when we get activated, when we can become connected with another person,
Hmm.
right? Then that creates that ventral vagal, right?
Right.
Um, so yeah, I think that those are all really great things and awarenesses to have, because we're all going to fall to our own foundation, whatever that was, whatever we learned as a tool at some point in our lives that worked for us,
Right.
right? So I'm curious though. I mean, you're so well versed in more than just the actual
Mhm.
disease.
Mhm.
How I can imagine how this must have helped you. You talked about your personal growth, right? How you just made some healthy choices and changes
Huge.
and put yourself in. But what about professionally?
So again, so I was 28 at the time, and I call it my Eeyore phase. As we all know, Eeyore and Winnie the Pooh. He
Yes.
just has a rain cloud over him all the
Mm,
time, and he's just Eeyore. And I realized at that time that I stayed with the guy for 2 years because I didn't have the confidence. I truly, truly believed that
mm,
nobody would accept me. Like I believed that. Like that this nobody else is gonna accept me. And so I'm just gonna have to stay with him.
mm,
And all of a sudden I was turning 30, like 28 to 30 went really fast somehow. And I was turning
mm,
30 and I went, okay, I can't do this at 30. Like my life is moving on and I want changes in my life. So I began doing the self help. I began, reading. I bought CDs.
mm.
We had CDs. We used to,
Yeah.
right again. I mean,
I was like, what's wrong with that? Oh, right. We don't
right.
have CD players anymore. It's just
Right, like,
like
would have no way of listening to them now, right? But I started listening to CDs and just learning and learning and how to deal with this, and these are things that are not taught, and, it's not right or wrong, it's not taught, it's just not taught, and we're taught yeah, and it little by little working through it. So it took me until I was 30. I thought, okay, I need at on my 30th birthday, these changes need to have happened. And they
Mm,
did. And so yeah, it's been little by little and it naturally came to me. I was in the mortgage industry, so I was in a completely different industry,
mm.
which is very stressful at times. Very,
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
I'm no longer in the mortgage industry.
So
So,
then how did that change your professional life?
um, I was so back to podcasting. I was in charge of an event in San Diego. For those of you that are from San Diego, it's called the University Club. It's a like a business club, and
Mm,
we put on an event and for people in the podcast world. It had okay, now I can't think of the names, but it was Mari Smith, who is a Facebook guru. It was Michael
mm,
Stelzner, who puts on the social media marketing world.
mm,
And it was John Lee Dumas, who is an entrepreneur on fire, who kind of started, he kind of made podcasting what it is. And we hope that we put on this event with those three speakers. And I had never even heard of a podcast. And the funny thing was, like, I was in charge of it, which was funny. Um, and so, anyways, I left there going, I'm going to start a podcast. So I was still in the mortgage industry and I thought I
mm,
need something to give me sparkle in life. The mortgage industry to me was boring. I didn't enjoy it. And so I thought, okay, I'll just launch a podcast. And so I did in 2015. And then that grew me into life with herpes. And then it's grown. And now I'm working on a master's in Christian leadership, which is also counseling. So it's kind of like moved through.
Yeah, you just keep following the yellow brick road.
Yeah, exactly. And you're like, oh, more school. Awesome. Like, but
Oh,
it's great.
I
It's great.
totally understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I've had a similar path. Um,
Right.
so yeah. So I think that's great. And it sounds like you're open to the fact that you're still in a constant state of evolution and that you're using this as a way to continue to open up and expand more. And that has allowed you opportunity to expand more
Right.
and so on.
Yeah. You never want to be stagnant in life or anything. And I always say, stagnant water makes mosquitoes and nobody wants to be around that. So
Yeah.
I brought up mosquitoes twice in this podcast, which is funny, but
Are there mosquitoes in Las Vegas? I
There's
mean,
not, there's
I
no
just,
mosquitoes, which is awesome.
where is this coming from? Yeah.
I don't know. Well, you just think that like, anytime you like go on like a tropical vacation, it's like you're sitting out there with your margarita or whatever, your drink of choices, and you're like, like smacking your,
Yeah.
anyways. Yeah, it's continuing to grow. So I think anybody else that's listening going like, how can I get through this? Or I'm dealing through this right
Mhm.
now. Um, whatever you're dealing with. I mean, it's literally one step at a time. And number one, I go back to forgiveness,
Mhm.
responsibility, and then go to education and community, and it'll start.
I love that. I
Mhm.
love that. I think that it's challenging to take something this complex, really,
Mhm.
and make it simple.
Mhm.
So for people to have those digestible steps that they can just kind of like continue to do over and over and over again,
Mhm.
because as you continue to grow, your community is going to change a little bit,
Mhm.
and
Oh
that's
yeah,
okay.
and my community has. It's been very interesting watching my community change over since 2017. Um, Something I've noticed in my community, which is it wasn't intentional, and the way that sex is positioned now to our youth is extremely promiscuous. And it's very interesting. I turn 40 next week. Like, I don't want to say it, but I turn 40 next week. So I'm 40. I still think like I'm
Happy
20,
birthday.
um,
Yeah.
but there is a huge gap in what was like when I went to college. Um, Casual sex was a thing, but it's not the same that it is now. And what's very interesting is the people that have come to my community, um, little by little go, you know what? When they meet someone, they're like, I don't, of course, you want to have sex, of course, like that's a natural desire, but it's more like, I want to wait this time. Like, I really want to get to know this person this time. And it's been very interesting watching even college students will come
Mhm.
to me in the beginning and they're like, but you don't understand, Alexandra. Like, this is what it's like in college. Like, it's multiple people, multiple body counts. I'm like, what does body counts mean? It's like
Yeah.
that is the thing.
Mhm.
Um, and little by little, they're like, I don't want that anymore. Doesn't mean that they don't want to have sex. Doesn't mean they're not going to have sex, but it's been a very interesting transition that I've personally noticed in my
Mhm.
community. And I
Mhm.
think that that's something how I personally am, doesn't mean that I preach that or rub off. Maybe it's rubbing off, but um yeah, it's been interesting to see that evolvement. I'm proud of the people. I'm really proud of my community.
That's wonderful. Well,
Mhm.
and that also says that you know your community.
Right. Right.
Don't you find that by being othered, right, on
Mhm.
some level, and I'm sure your herpes diagnosis, even if it was just in your mind because you were, trying to mitigate any risk for yourself and sharing, but you become othered or you become isolated. When that happens, then you really genuinely value community when you create it. When you
Right.
consciously create something and you consciously create community, you really value them and you get to know them. And um, I've loved watching different people create their own communities and to see how they go about implementing it because um, there's something that's so magical and so powerful that happens
Uh-huh.
for the people who are in the community, but also for the person who's kind of like the quote unquote leader.
Mhm.
Because anytime we expand and grow, so people in community are growing, you're growing at the same
Mhm.
time, right? There's this beautiful like magic and alchemy that happens that makes the journey so special and poignant, and it creates a space where you're able to really be present,
Mhm.
right? And I think that that's so important. Um, I cannot wait for our community to be able to listen to this and hear how you moved through this in such a beautiful way. I'm sure it wasn't always pretty, but I think that
No,
in
terrifying.
general, the alchemy was really beautiful.
Mhm.
Um, And I also, for those who don't really know much about herpes, because it's like that dirty little word and
Yeah.
that little secret that nobody talks about, right?
Right.
That this allows them a little more capacity to be able to have those hard discussions.
Right, and that's a really good point that I always say because people will go, how do I even have this conversation in a relationship? How do I bring it up?"
Mhm.
And in marriages, in relationships, you have a lot of hard conversations. It's the way of life, and
Yeah.
the herpes if the herpes talk with your partner is not the easiest, hardest conversation you're having, then it's not right. Like, it should not be it's a uncomfortable conversation. I would say it's
Mhm.
uncomfortable, but it shouldn't be hard, right?
Mhm.
So it should be the easiest, hardest conversation you should have in a relationship.
Right. And that could come from two different things, right? So it could be hard because you have your own personal barriers that you have to break down. And it could be hard because it's possible that the partner that you're with, you don't feel safe to be
Right.
truly seen. And you have to look at what those things might look like and
Right.
why.
Right. Right.
So even though it's hard, it's perfect because that's a great way for you to know where your state of health is. And health has nothing to do with the herpes diagnosis. It has all to do with the health of who you are, body, mind, spirit, and
Mhm.
the health of your relationship. So again, it's looking for each in each situation as an opportunity for you to grow. And that's a perfect example of being able to do that, right?
Right.
Um, so we are wrapping up this conversation today, and I cannot tell you how grateful I am that we found each other. And I was like, oh my gosh, as soon as I read your information, I said, I absolutely want to have you come on and talk about that.
Great.
I couldn't wait to have you come on. So I was really excited and looking forward to this all day today. And I can't wait for us to hear all of the questions that our community has
I'm
um,
sure. Yeah.
collectively. And so I please want to remind everybody to like and subscribe to whatever platform you're listening to this on. We're on YouTube, we're on Spotify, we're on Apple Podcasts, and all of the other audio podcasts. And make sure that you write a review or let us know what you think about this conversation. There's no bad comment, honestly. Like, there's nothing,
No.
even if you disagree with anything that we say, I think it's important to start to have the dialogue. And I always say to all of my community, like, my name is Sharon, Uncomfortable Conversations Land, right? Like, my middle name is Uncomfortable Conversations. I love having uncomfortable conversations because it helps to, it helps to connect us. It helps
Yeah.
us to move through some things that we never felt safe to be able to do
Right.
before. So I thank you so much, Alexandra, for being here. Is
Welcome.
there anything that you'd like to share other than the fact that we're going to make sure that people can connect with you? And we're going to put all of your links in our notes. But is there anything you want to share as like a closing piece?
Yeah, yeah, I was thinking, one thing I didn't mention is at the time, it may not look like whatever we're going through, this growth or this what we think of as, like, unfortunate growth or, like, "Why did this happen?"
Hmm.
Um, but it's gonna grow you, and it's gonna grow you into the person that you've been either avoiding, or not aware that you were capable of that person. And that little person inside of you is like, "No, no, no, this is our chance. Like, we're gonna do this. Like, let's go get it." And personally for herpes, it gave me more confidence where we might think, "Oh, no, 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 you're gonna be like tiny now when you're just the confidence is gonna be so small that you can't even like leave your house." And it actually made me more confident. And
Yeah,
I'm grateful for that. So just remember that whatever you're going through, like this is your no, like this is gonna help you. You are gonna be a way amazing person when you get through. Like you're an amazing person now, but you're just gonna like shine bright through
I
this.
love that. So set your sights on getting to the other side and actually
Yes.
doing this,
And
and
yeah.
then find the help that you need so that you can get to the other side.
Right. Yeah.
Don't find the ways to stay where you are.
Exactly.
Find
Exactly.
the help that you need to get to where you want to go.
Mhm.
Right. Oh,
Exactly.
that's so good. I love this message. I love this
Same.
conversation. I'm so grateful for you and
Me too. This
all
is
that you're
great.
doing out in the world. And I again will put all of your contact information in the show notes. And thank you. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
all that
Yes.
you're doing.
Thank you for having me on, and I'm excited for everybody listening. So,
Oh, yeah, me too. Welcome to the community.
yes.
All right. Thanks everybody for listening. And until the next time, peace and love.